I'm going to start this video off with a quick disclaimer. I don't want to be a spoil sport to ruin anyone's fun or tell some kid that Santa and the Tooth Fairy aren't real, but I am going to be hitting on some truths about this topic that people won't necessarily want to hear. Many of us grew up around the Lord of the Rings films. They meant so much to us then, and they mean so much to us now. If you like what you currently know to be true about this scene, switch away from the video, because sometimes the fantasy is more interesting than the reality. But I just couldn't help myself. I had to keep digging. In the first Lord of the Rings film, The Fellowship of the Ring, there is a fight scene at the end between Aragorn and Lurtz, the Uruk-hai leader. It's a fantastic sword fight, yet again thanks to the amazing work of fencer and choreographer Bob Anderson. And at one point in the fight, Aragorn is down on his knees and Lurtz throws a knife at him, which Aragorn then deflects by striking it away with his sword. Now, this is where things get interesting, because depending on what source you read, there are many stories claiming more went on here than meets the eye. A bit like the fantastic behind-the-scenes info on Viggo kicking the helmet and breaking his toe, leading to that amazing scream. One story, and the first version I heard, was that the stuntman playing Lurtz could not see well through his facial prosthetics and accidentally threw a real knife instead of a fake one at Viggo rather than past him as was intended. And thankfully, because Viggo is of course the embodiment of Aragorn, he ricocheted the blade away with ease. This for me is where the problems first started to crop up with this version of events. Firstly, I could not understand why someone's vision would need to be obstructed at all for a shot that involved throwing anything at a cast member, whilst the only visible part of them was the back of their legs. But more glaring was the fact that the crew decided to store real knives next to fake knives. In fact, the idea of them having any real knives at all around is just... I'm going to break for a quick discussion on what a real knife actually is. A metal blunt knife is not a real knife, just like how a rubber knife is not a real knife. A real knife is sharp. A knife, in fact, is very much so defined by its sharpness, so nothing less than that should really be referred to as a real knife. I've heard discussions about a sharp knife being needed because the intention was for it to stick into a tree, to which I respond, which of those background trees was this throw going to be hard enough to not only reach, but pierce? The other version of this tale is that the throw was meant to be more off target, to the side of Viggo, that it was intended to look like it was going to hit him, but never really put him at any risk, because he was just going to dodge the blade. Unfortunately, that went wrong, and at the last second, Viggo was forced to intervene, not necessarily saving himself from great harm from the surely not real knife, but because of his lightning fast reflexes and because he's just so damn cool. There were no real lives at stake. No stuntman Lurtz without his eyesight chucking real knives around the set. But I pretty much bought this explanation of what happened. There was always this niggling doubt though, this feeling. It always looked like a tee-up, as though it was intended all along. So I went looking for something tangible. None of this, my uncle was the stuntman or my grandma was the knife. Something real, something from the source, something I could trust. And well, be careful what you wish for. The fiction in this case is much more interesting, and my meddling ways got me exactly what I wanted. The boring truth. In this quote from Peter Jackson himself, while talking about the scene, he says, "Having created our villain in Lurtz, we obviously had to finish him off. And we were actually shooting two things at once, because whilst I was filming Boromir's last stand, Barry Osborne was just on the other side of the hill. We were only about 30 or 40 feet away. He was just over the hill, on the other side of the slope, filming the fight between Lurtz and Aragorn. So this was largely shot by Barry. Viggo did this incredibly well. There's a shot coming up where he had to hit the knife that gets thrown at him with his sword, and he did it first take. That was a real knife being thrown, and he literally did bat it away with his sword for real. It wasn't anything fake about it. Hope, after all, sure, it was intended, but the first take, a real knife, Viggo really is Aragorn in real life. But if I'm honest with myself, I just think this is a bit of a mistake on Peter's part. I'm not calling the director of the greatest film trilogy ever made a liar, but surely they were not throwing a sharp blade this close to anyone's person. That would be insanely dangerous. It sounds cooler to say real knife, but I think that term might be misleading. I suspect it was a metal blunt simulator at most, and even then that's pretty bloody dangerous. So there it is, the reality of this famous shot. It may not be a blinded, sharp knife throwing accident myth that lots of us know it as, but it was still pretty dangerous. And Viggo is still one total badass. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Let me know if you'd like to see any videos discussing the fights from the Lord of the Rings. It's something I'm very, very happy talking about.